Chair. So, Mr. Collison, I'll just pick up where I left off. Just to clarify, the Canadian federal government has not contacted you or your company instructing you to pass along the savings on interchange fees from Visa, offered from Visa and MasterCard to small businesses. They have not contacted you to pass those savings along to Canadian small businesses. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I'll just clarify. In our view, we have passed the savings along, but has the federal government contacted us on this matter? Not to my knowledge.
So earlier this week at committee, Canada's current finance minister said that she would intervene if your company did not pass these savings along. There's a story in Canada's Globe and Mail this morning that one of your board members, Mark Carney, has been in talks with Canada's Prime Minister to join the cabinet in the position of finance minister. Has he informed you or Stripe's board of these talks?
I have not discussed anything pertaining to his to these matters with him, nor do I believe has anyone on the board. So no.
Do you think that it's problematic that you are facing questioning by a Canadian parliamentary committee on the failure of your company to pass along savings from interchange fees to Canadian small businesses? The current finance minister has said that she would intervene. They have not contacted you yet. And then this morning, there's a story in the Globe and Mail that one of your board members is in talks with the Prime Minister to become the finance minister.
It seems very proper to me that these are completely separate issues and kept very distinct.
This year, Mr. Carney accepted a senior economic advisory role with the Liberal Party. Did your company put in place any guardrails or screens to prevent Mr. Carney from perhaps seeing or having input on any Canadian public policy decisions after that point?
We have not discussed any Canadian public policy decisions at the board level.
But I asked you if you put any screens in place, because I just have to take your word for it that that happened as a public policy maker. He also sent out a highly partisan fundraising email for the Liberal Party. Did you put in place any screens given his economic advisory role?
We have a standard conflicts policy at the board, like most companies, and conflicts have to be disclosed to our general counsel. But I'd say that as a general matter, board members tend to have political views, and lots of board members at different companies are politically active in some form. And so, this seems this doesn't seem out of the ordinary to us.
It's not out of the ordinary for one of your board members to be in talks to become Canada's Prime Minister after the current Prime Minister, Finance Minister, after the current Finance Minister said at a committee earlier this week that she would be intervening due to your company not passing along savings from interchange fees to small businesses. You don't think that there's any potential conflict that Mr. Carney would now require a screen on?
Well, like I said, he's not been involved in those discussions.
But again, have you, what assurances do we have to take your word for that? You said that he has to disclose any potential conflicts to your council. Has he disclosed any potential conflicts for you, like, say, being the senior economic advisor to the Prime Minister of a country in which you are significantly operating in?
I have not been privy to those discussions. I can't speak to what disclosures he's made.
So you don't know whether or not one of your senior board members that your company touted as a major boon to your board, you don't know whether or not he's disclosed any conflicts of interest, given that he now has a senior economic advisory role with the federal Liberal Party, and now there's a conflict between the current finance minister, a story in the Globe and Mail that he's about to become the finance minister, and you're not sure if he has disclosed any conflicts to your council.
I'm just not privy to those discussions. And as I said, issues pertaining to Canadian public policy just have not at any point been topics of board discussion.
Do you think maybe you should be?
So I should be which?
Do you think maybe you should be privy, given that you're sitting in front of a Canadian parliamentary committee after members of this committee have heard from small businesses across this country of their extreme displeasure that your company has elected not to pass along savings on interchange fees to them, and now one of your board members is embroiled in a potential conflict of interest? Do you think that's maybe you should call your council after this meeting and say, hey, maybe we should put a screen around this guy to make sure that there's no conflict of interest? Like, do you at least acknowledge that the optics are problematic?
Well, under the Lobbying Act, my understanding is that conflicts, are the responsibility of the board member, and you know, we trust that Mark Carney has taken all the right steps.
So I'll give you just one more chance because I've been around a hot minute and I know when things tend to blow up, and I have a feeling that this is going to become problematic for you. Do you have any personal reservations about not knowing whether or not one of your board members is in talks to become the finance minister of Canada after the current finance minister of Canada said that she would intervene on you not passing along savings on interchange fees to Canadian small businesses at a committee meeting this week? Do you not assess that as some sort of corporate reputational risk in the slightest?
I think maybe the sort of the difference in perspective and the disconnect here might come from the fact that the amounts of money that we're discussing are extremely small. We're talking
to
an
you.
amount.
What is small to you, Mr. Collison? Because I don't think it's going to be small to a Canadian small business. So
We're
what's
talking,
small?
We're talking. So I think this might be helpful context for all the questions.
What's small?
Two things have changed in Canada over the past year. One, because of the tax increase, costs for businesses have gone up by about $17.
You're
And
allowing small businesses to offset your tax burden. I understand that. That was savings defined for them, and we understand that. But you're saying it's small. What is small to a small business for you?
Okay, Madam, Ms. Rempel, MP Rempel Garner, sorry, the time is up. I'll let the witness answer, and then we'll turn it over to MP Van Bynen. Mr. Collison, the floor is yours.
I'll say the respective amounts in question very briefly are there's been a tax increase because of the new tax on payment processing costs of about $17 on average for a small business per year, $17 a year. And then the interchange agreement with the card networks results in a saving of about $10 per business per year. And so the net increase is about $7, but the amounts in question are $17 and $10 per business annually.
MP Van Bynen, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
So is coffee. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Collison. It is an impressive business that you've built in 14 years, but I'm curious, as the co-founder of Stripe and the CEO of Stripe, you must have been involved in the recruitment of Mark Carney to your board.
I was.
And you were aware, obviously, of all his close connections to the current Prime Minister and the current government when you recruited him.
I was not, and I'm actually not sure who the Canadian Prime Minister at the time was, but I first got to know Mark when he was Governor of the Bank of England, when he was living in the UK. And at the time, I thought of him as a British official, and our first discussions were in that context.
Well, he's in all the papers here, and if you had missed it, in the beginning of the summer, there were stories from the senior officials in the Prime Minister's office saying how disappointed they were with the current finance minister, Minister Freeland, and how she was a terrible communicator and they weren't getting their message out, so that they were trying to actively recruit him to run in a by-election to get into cabinet. You must have been aware of that. And then over the summer, when they were unsuccessful, the Liberals, they made him a special advisor to the party and really inserted him essentially as the de facto finance minister above Minister Freeland, while he still serves on your board. But yet in the fall, Minister Freeland made this great to-do about, I'm going to massively reduce the merchant fees for small businesses in Canada with this thing that you are calling minuscule and $10. During all of that discussion in the lead up to that announcement, because the current finance minister, not the next finance minister, but the current finance minister claims that they had discussions. Did Stripe have discussions directly with the finance officials in the lead up to that announcement? Was the future finance minister, Mark Carney, involved in those discussions?
I don't know of all the discussions that may have happened between different officials at the finance department and Stripe and any consultations that might have occurred, but I can say that Mark Carney was not involved.
So the the determination of your company to defy the government's requests, which your competitors have complied with, to pass on these savings, whether you think they're small or not, was made which obviously is an embarrassment to the current finance minister, that she can't get you to comply. You said it's de minimis, it doesn't amount to much. In fact, in your press release, you said it's because of the goods and services tax changes. But really, you only had a one-year holiday on the goods and services tax. So, and you earlier said that, you know, a basis point is a minor amount of money, and your press release says that this is an impact of 0.036%, and therefore you couldn't pass it along. But that seems like, by your own words, minuscule when your business in Canada has improved by 50% in 2 years, as you claimed in your opening, that you can't afford to pass on a minuscule change and defy this Liberal Minister of Finance when you have the next Minister of Finance on your board.
So is there would you just comment
is it de minimis?
on that?
Is it de minimis or not? You said it was de minimis, but it's clearly significant to you because you've said that you're not going to pass it along.
Okay, I think the issue is...
If it was irrelevant, you'd pass it along. You say, okay, I can pass on that $10, that's $7, but it must be significant to you.
But the businesses that pay us for payments as kind of a dedicated payments product, you know, as we've been discussing, we passed all that along. I think the issue at hand is really whether businesses like Stripe...
In fact, your press release says that you're not passing it along. Is your press release wrong?
I think the press release is referring to what I was about to get to next. I think the issue at hand is whether businesses like Stripe should be able to have a simple, single, stable price that's predictable for businesses and that doesn't change through time.
Yeah, it's predictable. You can make something predictable by making it an excessively high flat rate. That's predictable. But you're the only player. Are you that inefficient? Mark Carney sits on the board of a company that is less efficient than your competitors, that you can't find a way to pass on this minuscule thing? Are you really that poor in your technology relative to your competitors that can do this? Or is it that Mark Carney is trying to undercut the current finance minister?
Mark Carney has not been involved in any of these discussions.
So when your company decided to defy the Canadian government, your board of directors never had a discussion? You've never had a discussion about defying the Canadian government on this initiative?
Our Canadian pricing has never been discussed at the board level. Our revenue in Canada is less than 10% of Stripe's global revenue. And the issues we're discussing here
shouldn't cost you much to pass it along. So why would you defy the request of the current finance minister? Wouldn't you respect that the perceived conflicts of interest, not just the real ones, but the perceived one that your board member has in being the inserted finance minister between the prime minister and the current finance minister, would say, you know what, maybe we should be careful. Since the Canadian part of our business is small and this is a minuscule amount of that business, we should comply? Or is it that you're just too greedy to try and screw Canadian small businesses, that you'll take every dollar out of them as you are an American-based company? You don't really care about the Canadian market, and neither does your board member. You would have thought your board member, Mark Carney, would have said, hey, guys, like, this doesn't matter. You shouldn't do this reputational harm to the company. Is he that detached as a board member that he doesn't actually care about what's going on in his own country?
Yeah, I actually have the opposite point of view, where rather than making any of these pricing decisions on the basis of political exigencies or perceived allegiances or anything, we try to ignore the politics and just do what we think is best for the
Mark
business
Carney
we serve.
on your board? You ignored the politics. Come on. It's unbelievable that I've sat on boards. It's unbelievable that you would make a decision against a Canadian government order with the future finance minister and the personal advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada and on economic policy, that you would make a decision to defy that government with the senior economic advisor to the Prime Minister on the board. It's just not believable. Either that is misleading, or the current board member really is indifferent, maybe he is indifferent since he's moving Brookfield to New York to avoid Canadian taxes, So he's so indifferent to the Canadian market that he doesn't even stick his nose into that. Like, at least he could read the papers and would have probably seen this issue that he's caused, carbon tax Carney's caused for himself and caused for you. So why is it that a board member who you think is effective doesn't even have the sense at board meetings or directly with the CEO to say, why are you defying the Canadian government? I can't imagine how irresponsible that is for a board member.
Mr. Perkins, you're way out of time. I'll let the witness answer, and I'll just remind you, as I've done in the past, that this is not the floor of the House of Commons where you get rewarded for using gimmicks and calling people carbon tax Carney. I appreciate more decorum here, so I don't know if the... So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Perkins.
I'll just I can't speak to Mark and his actions. I'll just very briefly say on the small business point that the revenue we make from businesses in Canada on a kind of per business basis has declined over the past year. Any of these small business interchange changes are more than outweighed by the tax increase. And so we decided that we would just accept that. And we think it's better for businesses that even though our margins have gone down slightly, we believe in offering a stable, predictable price. And that hasn't changed, even though it's actually slightly less profitable for us than it was a year ago.